For people who aren't familiar, Sean Strickland wore a shirt to a press conference before his fight recently that said, "A woman in every kitchen, a gun in every hand," right? And so this is the other aspect of what happens when everybody can show personality, is that this dude has a bunch of opinions that personally I won't even categorize for the moment because, again, I'm not here to moralize.
Pablo Toure recently sat down with Ariel Helwani to discuss the UFC.
We've got a pretty supportive gay and lesbian community in this city. I did want to ask you about something you wrote a couple of years ago. You said, if I had a gay son, I would think I'd...
Oh, look, another. I'm saying to you, the swamp, you guys, the swamp.
You become a champion, you become a star, and someone says...
Let me ask you something. Are you gay? No, are you? Let me know. Are you gay?
Can I get an answer?
Well, no, I'm asking. This is the part. Are you a gay man?
I'm an ally of the community.
Okay. If you had a son and he was like, you had a son, he was gay, you'd be like, oh man, you don't want a grandkid?
No problem with it.
Oh man, well, dude, you're a weak man, dude. You're part of the problem.
I think it's textbook to say, objective to say, that it was incredibly explicitly homophobic. But I say that to get to the point that Dana White, the president...
I get so bothered with that word. He ain't afraid of somebody that is gay. Can we use the right words or the right language, man?
President and CEO of the UFC.
Free speech. Control what people say. Going to tell people what to believe. Going to tell people... I don't tell any other human being what to say. Free speech, brother. People can say whatever they want and they can believe whatever they want.
As it pertains to MMA and Dana White, this has been a conscious effort on his part over the last few years, and I would say probably dating back to 2016, where it has increasingly become this stance.
And it's a stance, I want to be clear, that has become this rallying cry for a whole swath.
Why is that a bad thing? It's not a bad thing. It's only a bad thing for soy boy nerds, like these two. Soy boy nerds. For people like that, yes, this stance that Dana is taking is a bad thing. What's the problem here?
This stance. And it's a stance, I want to be clear, that has become this rallying cry for a whole swath of American culture now.
Yes.
Yeah, the majority. You're in the minority. Okay?
Finally, someone says it.
It's very smart and calculated. But what I want the...
No, it's just having common sense. That's what it is.
The audience to understand is when he sits there and says, I don't police speech, I don't tell grown men and women what to say, and I've never done that, it's actually not true.
As we have gone over, White punished Nate Diaz for using an anti-gay slur in the form of a fine and a 3-month suspension. Former fighter Matt Mitrione attacked the trans community, labeling them his words.
Yeah, okay. But that was like 10, 12 years ago, whatever. People can change, And it's, especially if you change for the better, which means if you change to now being like, F everything, I let them speak whatever they want to say, If you change to that, how is that a bad thing? You know what I mean? Even these soy boys, if they all of a sudden did 180 and changed to the same stance that Dana and all sane people have, that would have been a good thing. And I would say, hey, congratulations, you're now not a soy boy anymore.
Freaks with mental issues for wanting to fight against a fellow woman.
So he knew what he did wrong. If he was standing in front of a panel, right, or a judge, and he was arguing on why somebody who used to be a man shouldn't be allowed to fight a woman, he wouldn't have said it the way that he said it. He would have said it completely different.
You also have to understand, in these times, they didn't have the FU money the same way they have today. They had to toe the line with Fox or whatever it was, Bud Light or whatever it was, You have to take that into consideration,
There's nothing wrong with having a point of view. Everybody's crying, oh, it's freedom of speech. And yeah, okay. Work at any company anywhere in the world, okay? And give your opinion in an ignorant, where you come off sound like an ignorant bigot. See how long you last at that company.
So what was that policy that just coincided to have changed with the rise of Donald Trump?
Oh, his policy was actually quite clear. Like, you can't go around offending people. In fact, I would say his policy was keep it to yourself.
Helwani would then use the Yoel Romero example.
But the reality is this. You just won the biggest fight of your career, America doesn't want to hear your thoughts on Jesus. And, keep that stuff at home. Religion, politics, all that stuff. When you're out there fighting and you're being interviewed, they want to hear about the fight. It's awesome that you love Jesus. Love Jesus all you want. Just don't have to do it publicly.
Thus, Toure asks the important question.
When it comes to the question of what is the difference in incentive, in motive, in rationale, Why has it flipped?
They continue to ask Sean Strickland, Dana White, and others is, where's
Maybe he's sick and tired of all these, people that wants to control everybody and every little thing, just like a mob. But in this case, it's a small little minority.
the line? How do you police this? What do you need to do? What do you say to your fighters if it goes too far, et cetera, et cetera? That's not the question to ask anymore. The question has always been, what has changed?
And this is why Helwani is so great. He breaks it down to a T.
The turning point is the summer of 2016. In the summer of 2016, July of 2016 to be exact, the UFC is sold for $4.025 billion. At the time...
Yeah, maybe that had something to do with it, getting all that money and all that stuff. And, expanding to a level where they can now say to their fighters, you can do whatever, you can say whatever you want.
An astronomical number. No sports entity had ever been sold for that amount. In retrospect, it was a steal, right? If it's sold today, it's probably 10, 11. Just look at WWE,
that's like
right?
An NFL team plus a little.
Exactly. And so shortly thereafter, Dana, like literally a week or so after, Dana White's first appearance publicly is at the GOP convention on behalf of his friend Donald Trump, who has been a longtime supporter of combat sports, pro wrestling, boxing, and MMA.
Yeah, without Donald Trump, you wouldn't be here, Ariel.
Who would host events at his casinos in Atlantic City and whatnot. And he went up there, and it was a bit of a departure.
I don't even know why these soy boys are covering UFC. Especially Ariel. I don't even know why. Because if he's such a liberal soy boy that hates free speech, you're in the wrong sport, man. You should be covering NHL or some shit like that.
Departure for Dana White, because he had always been like the guy who said, like, keep politics out, keep religion out, keep these controversial takes out.
What's up, GOP?
And then in 2016, because of the rise of Donald Trump and his relationship with Donald Trump, he started to get a little bit more political over time. And now he would probably say, I'm not getting political. But of course, when you're appearing at something like that, you are getting political, right? Donald Trump becomes president, and that's an amazing ally to have. And he's on planes with him. And the Venn diagram between the two worlds is starting to get even bigger. That little part in the middle, whatever the hell that part is called, is starting to get bigger and bigger, right?
Yes.
The MMA world or the UFC world.
Overlap.
Yes, the overlap. 2020, everything changes. What changes in 2020? COVID happens. And what happens? Everyone else shuts down. If it was up to Dana White, he wouldn't have shut down one single event, one single weekend. He would have kept going.
Yeah, and he would have been in the right, man. We all know the Sniffles 19. I knew that Sniffles 19 was BS from the beginning. We're talking in February of 2020. I was like, all right, the NWO. It's a little bit too early for them. I didn't think the NWO would start their plans in 2020, but I was like, okay, so that's what they're doing. So anyways, with everything, even what Ariel knows about the Sniffles 19, how is this something you can, complain about? Had you been a decent guy, you would have said, which, Dana tried, if Dana had it his way, he would have just kept going. And in hindsight, he would have been right, If you've been a good person, you would have said that. Somebody that values truth.
Shuts down. If it was up to Dana White, he wouldn't have shut down one single event, one single weekend. He would have kept going. The first event that shut down was in late March of 2020. He wanted to keep going. He tried every which way to keep going. He found...
what a bad thing that was.
A Native American reservation in the United States, in Oklahoma. He found another one in California that were, not beholden to the same state rules, that he was going to hold events. Eventually, in mid-April of 2020, Disney said, stop. Disney being, the parent company of ESPN, his broadcast partner said, stop, we need to take a breath. That only lasted 3 weeks. And then early May, they hosted a series.
Such a bad guy Dana is, man.
Series of events in Jacksonville in an empty arena. And at the time, he said, I'm going to be first. I'm going to, keep the show rolling. And what it did was it made his sport exponentially popular because...
I wonder why.
People who were bored watched. The rise of sports gambling, right? Mm-hmm. People are now saying like, I got my parlay Saturday night. I've got 8 hours of entertainment when there's nothing going on. Huge, right? And because of the people who thought COVID is a joke, this is all a joke, this is the...
And it was. Hence why it's called Sniffles 19.
One guy who's spitting in the face of all this. This is my guy. Towards the end of 2020 was... oh, okay, there's a lane here, and there's an opportunity to be the voice and the sport of this entire community that maybe feels like the other sports entities are not serving them or in line with their beliefs.
As we have discussed many times over, the UFC being Trumpified, not that they didn't have
that's a good thing.
it already, But this cause and effect has led them to carve out an even greater, more refined, more defined path in the pantheon of sports. But when asked about being a free speech absolutist, as in, yeah, the fighters can say whatever they want, but so should the journalists and reporters, is what Pablo Torre brings up. Here was Helwani's answer.
It is the great irony. Dana White, who says you can say whatever you want, I'm not going to tell any man or woman how to feel or what to say, is maybe one of the most sensitive people that I've ever met. And I know better than anyone because Dana White doesn't like me. I have not interviewed Dana White since 2016 because he didn't like that I would go on my show and talk about the most benign sports minutia topics. I'm talking about,
Hold on, wasn't it because Ariel spilled the beans on the Brock Lesnar fight or something in UFC 200 or something like that? Wasn't it? That was the thing that broke the camel's back. Yeah, I remember that was the thing. He was like, F this guy, man. We wanted to have this as a surprise, and this guy just,
revenue sharing. I'm talking about collective bargaining. I'm talking about the business of MMA. And in addition to that, breaking fights and, the same crap that you hear on sports talk radio or podcasts or YouTube, wherever. That's what I'm doing. And in their mind, I was supposed to be something else. I was supposed to be the type of media that he generally talks to now, which is very, very friendly, bro-y, like, isn't this next fight going to be great? Isn't this awesome?
Someone's on the same team.
Exactly. That's what they wanted. And I wasn't looking for that. I was looking to be, Walter Cronkite. He's one of my idols. My second son's name is Walter because of Walter. I wanted to be Mr. Big J journalist, right?
Man, you're going to get stuffed in a locker after this podcast.
That's fine. And so I wanted to ask certain questions. I wanted to talk about certain things, and that would increasingly upset both Dana White and Lorenzo Fertitta. He tried to make my life a living hell at ESPN and preclude me from talking to certain people or go certain places.
Because he thought you're disloyal, and in a way you were.
Or have opportunities. It was not very fun.
For those who don't know, check out our clips on demand. We have covered this previously. Essentially, Ariel Helwani, as he discussed in this clip, has been breaking news about the fighters, about pay, and breaking the news about fights that are going to be upcoming. And one of the biggest ones that he broke was Brock Lesnar's return to the UFC. And he did it how? Through sourcing, because he is an esteemed, impeccable journalist. His batting record, he said at one point, is near 1,000.
But you're forgetting that, if I'm not mistaken, that Dana, when Ariel wasn't anybody, Dana, gave him a shot and took him in and gave him interviews and things like that. And you would think that if you do that for somebody, that maybe they wouldn't spill the beans on a big fight that you spend a lot of money on, You would think like, okay, I'll keep my mouth shut on this.
Because he is just that dang good at the job. And essentially what happened was, I believe this UFC 199 or 200, I think 199. He was told that he needed to be removed from the press room or from where the press report from in the arena. And he refused, but then he was told multiple times, had his cameraman go with him, and Dana White told him, you're done. You F this up, and he made a saying of there's, a bullet to your head by the Fertittas because you ruined this. And he banished him. Dana White banished Ariel Helwani.
Understandable.
For good journalism. Too good of journalism, I would argue. And his credential was completely revoked. Now, for those of you who are familiar with our network, you may remember the story of Cenk going to MSNBC and then him going on the record in the aftermath of what transpired and why he was essentially pushed out. And him being stonewalled essentially by powerful media institutions. That same thing happened to Ariel Helwani. He worked for Fox Sports while also doing the MMA Hour on Vox. And when former fighter Rory McDonald expressed his disappointment in how much he was being paid, a small percentage of what he generated, and that he wanted to test free agency, here's what went down.
I still feel that I was worth more. I brought more to the table than what I really got.
So the UFC, and I heard Lorenzo Fertitta, who was the CEO of the UFC at the time, didn't like that this type of stuff was being discussed, that a disgruntled UFC fighter was coming on my show and airing this stuff out. He called Fox Sports. He called my boss, George Greenberg, and said, you need to get rid of Ariel. And George called me that night and said, you're out. They've asked for you to be removed. You are out. And it was like a 2-minute phone call. And that was devastating because this was a TV job. There aren't a lot of mainstream TV jobs in the sport. It was a huge blow. And so being the kind of person that I am, I don't like to just kind of like sit in the corner and, lick my wounds. I say, all right, I'm not beholden to anyone anymore. The shackles are off. What am I going to do? I'm just going to go and break every single story that I could possibly break. And I was obsessed. I was obsessed with breaking every single story pertaining to the UFC. Now, again, benign stuff. I'm not digging through financials. I'm trying to find out who's fighting who, what's the main event for UFC 200 that was coming up that summer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I was doing a pretty good job. I was doing such a good job that the UFC was convinced that I had a mole in the company that was feeding me this information. So they would walk into people's offices, close the door, and say, hand me your phone, and see if there was any conversation. They would put on conference calls and talk about fake fights to find out if there was someone feeding me. They believed that I was logging into these conference calls and not announcing myself and listening to their conversations. On my life, none of that ever happened. You know what I was doing? Journalism. I had sources. I had people that wanted to
Making
talk to me.
calls, finding out stuff.
Yes, it was very easy.
But in addition,
But couldn't that be the same thing? I got calls, I know some people from the inside. Maybe those were moles. And, who knows?
was the manipulation inside the UFC's offices and how they conduct business, the bullying tactics that they put forward, and what they are all about. More from Pablo Toure and Ariel.
You just want to bring the UFC down because Sean Strickland attacked the gay mafia.
Helwani on the latter's banishment.
So they took my credential off my neck and walked me out, and there I am standing in the parking lot of the Forum, banned from the UFC.
So to be clear, right? You don't work for the UFC.
No, I cover the UFC. Yep.
But they grant journalists in ostensible respect of what it means to, again, exercise freedom of speech, credentials to ask questions and to cover and to write about and do all of this, chronicle their sport. And so what they're saying is you are no longer allowed. And how long does that ban last?
48 hours that lasts. I was very rattled by this experience. I went to my hotel.
I mean, it's a sad mental image.
The worst.
I would have done the same thing. If I think you're a rat and disloyal, I don't want you there. You're an enemy to my company, and I don't give a fuck. You're an enemy. I don't want you there. So,
thing to have happened to our relationship actually was me going to ESPN, because for Dana White, getting to ESPN was that was his North Star. That's where he always wanted to be.
That's why he was manicuring and regulating speech, was to get a deal with an ESPN.
Disney,
and
yeah.
the ESPN.
You know how ridiculous this whole thing is? I don't know what the point with this whole video is, but it feels like they want to make a point where they're trying to say that, listen, I know you like Dana White because he says he's for free speech and this and that, but look at what he did here, 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 and there. That means he's not for free speech. Wake up, people. Dude, that's not gonna work. I don't care what he did in the past. As long as he is for free speech right now, today, that's all I care about. I don't care about any of this stuff. What matters is right now. Are you for free speech or not? And to me, these two are not for free speech. And to me, they're soy boys. That's all. This is just ridiculous.